I wanted to clean up a little bit the UI that I had for the dice game and add some enhancements to it. So let's pull down what we had last time and go from there. So let's spend a minute to refresh our memory of where we were last time. All right, so we have a window where we make the choice. We can either pick low, 7, or high. And remember how this is to work, that you have 100 points, you pick 7, you roll 2 dice. If the value is 7, you win 4-1. If the value is either low, that is 2 through 6, or high, which is 8 through 12, you lose. So I lost because I rolled a 1 and a 2. I'll pick low. Yep, I lost again, and so on. So let's look at this, refresh our memory. Let's make it look at least a little bit cleaner. Okay? So, I'm going to spend my time looking mainly at the GUI. The other classes, there's not tons going on. We have a dice class, which simply allows you to roll a dice, randomly set the value, randomly between 1 and 6. It has an attribute that we use to get, and we could get that attribute, or we could roll it and set the attribute. We also have the high-low game itself, which has the game logic, where we have a pair of dice. We take the user's choice and the pick, or the bet rather. We roll the 2 dice, we get the value, we assume they get paid nothing, and then based on whether what they roll is high, medium, or high, 7, or low, if they pick low and it's less than 7, then they get a payoff. Otherwise, they get a payoff of negative times their bet. 4 times their bet, negative 4 times their bet, and so on. So it's pretty straightforward. So we're going to really focus on the UI, which I just closed. All right, we have our swing classes and AWT classes. Those are classes that are geared towards user input. I have, as we can see, I have a label that says how many points you have. I have a label to make a choice. I have the options in an array. I have a JCombo box, which is a drop-down that has a value that comes from this array. I have a button to play, a label for dice 1, a label for dice 2, and a label for the results. And then I create my rules class. G contains the rules of the dice game. All right? I've just gone and created a panel and added everything to that panel. So by default, things are going to be stacked horizontally. However, since I set the layout to be along the y-axis, things are going to be stacked vertically. I set the points. When I play the game, initially I'm assuming the bet is 1. I get their choice from the drop-down. I play the game. I determine whether they've won or lost. I add to their number of points. I set that, and then I display the value for the dice. Questions about this from last time? If we want to improve the look of this a little bit, one thing we can do is put some of these things next to each other. So for example, really, make choice should probably be next to the drop-down instead of over top to it. Maybe we put the button on the same line, and maybe we put the 2 dice on the same line. And then we put the results over top of it. Now, simplest way to do that is we're going to put panels inside our panels. Right now, we created a single panel, and we set the orientation of it to be along the y-axis, so it's vertical. So everything we put gets stacked on top of each other. That's why everything's in one line. One of the things we can put inside a panel is another panel. And that panel can have an orientation that's horizontal. So if we want to have the words make choice and the drop down next to each other, we can put those sort of in a sub-panel. And then add that sub-panel to the main panel. And so on. If we want to put the 2 dice next to each other, if I want to put the play button next to these, we can include all these different sub-panels so that in general it's still stacked vertically, but any given component could be stacked horizontally. So I'll show you what I mean here. So let's create a panel. And I'm going to call it P choice, because this is what's going to have my choices in it. So JPanel P choice equals new JPanel. And I'm going to add to that the label for choice. I'm going to add to that the options drop down. And I'm going to add to that the play button. So now those aren't on the main panel, they're in the sub-panel. And because we haven't set the layout of the sub-panel, it's going to be oriented horizontally. I can then go and add that whole panel to the main panel. So at that point, these are going to be stacked vertically, but that P choice is going to have three things side by side in it. So if I do that, then I get this. All right. You have 100 points, make choice low, and play. So I won, because I picked low and it was 6. Let's pick 7. Yeah, I lost. All right, and so on. Let's add some more stuff to it. All right, let's do the same thing with the dice. So I can create a panel for the dice. So I can add the 2 dice labels to that dice panel, and then add the whole dice panel to the main panel. So I have panels inside of panels. The sub-panels are oriented horizontally, so I put things alongside of each other. The main panel is oriented vertically, so the main things I put in that are stacked vertically. And so on. Now, again, the focus of this class is not to make perfect looking UIs, but just put some effort to make these look good and make sure it's functional. Now, it's much better for a game to actually show the dice instead of showing a 1 and a 6. So that's what we're going to work on next. We're going to go and we're going to create, instead of labels that show the number of the dice, we're actually going to create a image so that when we roll the dice, we actually see the values of the dice instead of just seeing the number 6 and 6. We'll actually see a dice with 6 spots on it. All right, so let's go and do that. I have in here that I used for another lab in another class. I have 6 dice images, and they're labeled D1 through D6 JPEG. So I'm going to copy them into my application. So now in the same folder as my application, I have 6 files, D1 through D6. So I have to figure out how in Swing I can show an image. So I'm going to go Java Swing Image. How do I add an image to a JPanel? Well, this looks like one way to do it. All right, I'm going to import a couple of things. That I need. Okay? And I'm going to put code in here to display the images. Now, I'm going to create two variables because I want to create a variable that has the image name of the first dice. Then I'm going to create a variable that has an image name of the second dice. So I'm going to create two strings here. And the image name is simply a concatenation of the value of the dice a D to start out, plus the value of the dice, plus IMG at the end. Or I'm sorry, JPG. And likewise, the name of the second image is equal to that. Except we get the value of dice 2. So if you remember, the dice are named D1 through D6. So that's the convention by which we're following that. So if I know the value of the dice, I can form the name, the image name that's going to go in there by taking the letter D, adding the value of the dice, then adding .jpeg at the end. So I now have my two variables. I'm going to copy this code here. And the URL that I'm going to pull is not this long URL, but it's just going to be the file name that contains the image, which I said is image name 1. Okay, buffered image, image 1 equals image IO. Read the image that has this file name. I'm going to create an icon from that image, and I'm going to set the label to have the icon of that image. And we'll do this for dice 2 as well. All right. Unreported exception. All right. What would you do to fix this? Unreported exception must be caught or yeah, what do we do? Yeah, put a try-catch around this. So we can put, actually could put this around everything if we wanted to. And I can just put something in the label saying that there was an exception. E already means something else. So I can't use exception E. I'll have to pick something else. Eventually I'll get this to compile cleanly. Okay. So now if I run this, getting an exception. Well, what I'm going to do is temporarily, I'm going to put, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do and see what the exception is. When I'm developing, I might want to display the full exception. When I'm done and this goes into production, I might want to change it so that it doesn't show the complete exception. It just shows some kind of user-friendly error message. No protocol D2 JPEG. Oh. Well, because it is, a URL simply stands for Universal Resource Locator, and it can actually relate to a file on your machine. So I think I'm going to do this. If you notice, you open up a web page, It actually shows you file ///. So I'm going to try to duplicate that. No protocol. File, I think I have these in the wrong order. I think it should be file : Isn't what? Yeah. No. Shouldn't matter. Right. Can't get input stream from URL. Let's see. Missing an import. Can't read input file. Oh. I got rid of the D. There we go. So this makes for a better game experience. I can go and remove out these things, so I just have the image. Stuff that I don't do very often, I unfortunately don't really remember. So I have to look up. And sometimes that's a little fuzzy. All right, I picked play. I lost. Click play again. I won. 7 in play. I won. All right. I'm ahead, so I'm going to quit, which is good gambling advice. All right, how could we make it so that we had a bet here? Let's do a couple of things. So a couple things to modify this here. First thing we're going to do is I'm going to add a dummy selection to the drop-down. How would I add a dummy selection to the drop-down? Where does the drop-down get its values from? Gets its values from option strings. So how would I add a value in there? Yeah, just add an empty one here that says make choice. All right. So that's going to work, sort of. They can. What are we going to do to prevent that? Pardon me? Yeah, we could do a couple of things. I'm going to throw an exception. All right. Why am I going to throw an exception? Well, I'm going to throw an exception because, well, let's see. Let's see what happens if I choose it, so we can decide what kind of exception we're going to get. All right. It thinks if we said make choice, it's low. And it thinks that high, it doesn't know what that is either. The choices are all screwed up. Because I'm passing to that function the option. And the option is 0. So one thing I can do is I can say if user choice equals 0, then I have an error. And I can store in the results must make valid choice. Otherwise, I do all this stuff. But then remember, my function is expecting a 0, 1, or a 2, and I'm now going to give a 1, 2, or 3. So I'm going to have to subtract 1 from user choice. It'll make 1 a 0, which is what we want, right? Low is in position 1, and yet the function is expecting low to be 0. Right? Low was 0, 7 was 1, and high is 2. All right? But in this array, it's 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we're going to have to adjust it down by 1 to make it work. So I could do that, and that would work. Let's make a valid choice. If I pick low, I won. If I pick 7, I lost. If I pick high, I lost, won. So I'm back on track now by doing that. Now, the only thing I don't like about that is if someone wrote another UI to go with this game, all right, they would have to get the validation right too. So I could do this, and it would be fine. But what I really want is I don't want anyone ever to call this function and give it a value that isn't 0, 1, or 2. So that if someone goes and replaces my UI with their own UI, I still want that validation to hold. So in cases like this, you're better off defining an exception. So I'm going to go here in my high-low game, and I'm going to look to see what our choice is. And if our choice is not between 1 and 3, I'm sorry, not between 0 and 2, I'm going to throw an exception. So I'm going to say this throws exception. And what I can say is if our choice is less than 0 or our choice greater than 2, then I have a problem. And I can throw an exception. Okay? So now, I don't even need this if statement in here. I don't even need that if statement in here because if I pick something, if I pick that, I'm going to change it to, if I pick option 0, I'm going to subtract 1, get negative 1. I'm going to call the I'm going to call this function, since it's negative 1, I'm going to throw an exception, and it won't proceed. I think I just made up a new word that's a cross between coin and choice. map equals gplay pick that. Oh, that's an error in my user test, my high-low game test. Just out of simplicity, I'm going to delete those. So now if I pick that first one, it gives me option 0, subtract 1 from it, option -1, and that's an invalid option. If I pick that, though, I win, lose, 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 lose again, finally win. Questions about any of this? Well, no. That's the whole dilemma of this. We already have the label make choice outside of it. The whole idea of this, why do we do something like this? Why do we put a dummy value? So the user doesn't just absent-mindedly click play without thinking about what they want their choice to be. Okay? So that's why we set a dummy choice at the beginning of a drop-down, all right, to make sure that that they think about it and choose it. That's like if you did a state, let's say, drop down. Someone that didn't notice that the state drop down was there or got lazy or whatever is liable to not choose a state and just click on the first one there. So you get a lot of people that are in Alabama because everyone would click, or not everyone, but many people might not notice that they have to click it and would just go past it. So that's why you put a dummy value at the beginning, to sort of force them to think and consciously make a decision instead of just taking the defaults and going on. Other questions? All right. We're going to talk more user interface next week, and then we'll get into some new stuff. All right. That's all I have today. We'll see you up in lab.